Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the StigmaCrusher here. Today I have a bit of a, well, sobering for me anyway, topic to talk about. And that is the mortality of people with bipolar disorder. I read an article just this morning actually, but it's not the first article I've read, about premature deaths in people with bipolar disorder. And it's a bit of a trend of articles that I've been reading. The first one was, I guess, last year that I read that said that people with bipolar disorder are more likely to die younger than are people without. And the number that was cited there was about 13 years younger. And when I looked into the literature, it was anywhere from 13 to about 18 years younger was the kind of the trend for the studies that I found. So on average, 13 to 15 to 18-ish years younger, I will die, is kind of the prediction. Now obviously this isn't on a person by person basis. This is on a population basis. So this isn't specifically for me. But this is just sobering for me because as a person that is living with bipolar disorder, I'm looking at this and going, is this my future? The study that I read today talks about a study where they looked at premature deaths in people not at the end of their lives, so not kind of premature aging, or not premature deaths at the end of life, but premature deaths kind of over a 10-year period, and looking at whether people in the study would die during that period. And people with bipolar disorder were 4 to 6 times more likely to die than people that did not have bipolar disorder, that did not have any psychiatric diagnosis. And that included people that smoked and people that had other diseases. So people that smoked had like a 4 times less chance of dying than people with bipolar disorder in this study. So that's quite sobering. And considering that up to 70% of people with bipolar disorder also smoke, that's quite sobering. So they controlled for that smoking consideration. And they found that even controlling for smoking, people who smoke were less likely by quite a lot to die in this study than were people with bipolar disorder. And again, that's very sobering to me. I look at that and I think, wow, is that what I'm up against here? And it's funny because bipolar disorder is not ever listed as one of the, the things you die of, right? On the list of things you die of, there's like cardiovascular disease, diabetes is on there, stroke is on there, right? But like bipolar disorder is not on there. No psychiatric disorder is on there. And yet you can see that psychiatric disorder, bipolar disorder, is quite the cause of death, it looks like. But it's like a secondary cause of death. So you wonder, what is it about bipolar disorder that causes you to die prematurely, that causes you to die so much? And there could be quite a few things. The first thing that I think most people think of is suicide. And yes, suicide is a factor. So in one of the studies I looked at, they looked at deaths that were of unnatural causes. And that would be, murder or suicide. And suicide was one of those causes, and it was indeed a significant factor of deaths. But it wasn't the only factor. It was not even by far the only factor. And so there are other factors. Well, we know that people with bipolar disorder have quite a few kind of comorbid diseases. So, things like migraine and fibromyalgia were found to be comorbid diseases, both of which I have. Thyroid disorder, also which I have. But we also know that, gastrointestinal disorders and dyslipidemia is very common, whether caused by the medication or, a cause for it, right? Diabetes is another one that happens a lot in people with bipolar disorder. Again, whether caused by the medication that one takes over time or not. So there can be a lot of kind of comorbid disorders that happen with bipolar disorder that seem to go with it. That is, they're not just there beside it, but they seem to actually go with it. Like migraine seems to happen more often with bipolar disorder than not. Now, I'm not saying migraine is causing deaths. It's probably not. But things like diabetes can be. Things like lipid disorders can be. Those kinds of things certainly can be causing deaths. Other things that can be causing deaths that are related to bipolar disorder, when you're in a manic state, there can be poor judgment, right, that goes along with that mania. There can be poor judgment. There can be sexual indiscretions that can cause health problems. There can be just like rash, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like you just do stuff, right? I can't think of the word for some reason, but you want to just do things, and you do things without thinking, and that can lead to some very poor choices that can lead to injury, or in the worst cases, it can lead to death. And so in mania, that can happen. In depression, you can get kind of the polar opposite, where you get sedentary. You don't move a lot, right? You don't exercise, you don't eat well, you don't sleep well. And these things can themselves cause health problems that can lead to poor health and, in the worst cases, death. So, we know that mental health leads to poor physical health. In bipolar disorder, that mental health is chronic. It's ongoing. It's cyclical. It's difficult to manage in some cases. It goes with these medications that themselves can cause symptoms and side effects that can cause themselves symptoms and side effects that can be difficult to manage, and that can, take either work to manage or can get away from you. And all of these things can cause health problems that can lead to poor health and, in the worst cases, death. So with a chronic and unremitting disease like bipolar disorder, I suppose it should be unsurprising that there is a toll, I guess, a toll taken on one's health that can lead to, in the worst case, death. And that happens more often than we'd like to admit, because our healthcare system isn't set up for diseases that don't go away, right? It's not set up for, especially diseases that are relapsing and remitting, that are sometimes there and sometimes not, and you can't really predict when they will be and when they won't be, and when they're going to go away and when they're going to come. Our healthcare system isn't set up for that. It's difficult for the healthcare system to treat that, and so it ends up not treating that very effectively sometimes. And so we end up with people that are kind of fending for themselves a little bit sometimes, and working with treatment plans that are old, maybe, that used to work or worked before, or that are now causing side effects that they didn't used to cause, or that are starting to cause emergent health issues that they don't know how to deal with, but they don't have their specialist anymore because they kind of like aged out of that specialist or whatever. And you know, their family doctor doesn't know what to do with them, or they haven't even gone back to their family doctor because they either didn't feel heard or because they don't feel it's helpful anyway. And for a variety of reasons, people don't get seen until things get really bad, or they don't get seen at all, right? And I think that, I mean, I know that I've been treated in the healthcare system. I've been treated poorly before. Not by my current healthcare team, not at all. But in emergent care, for example. I know that I've gone there and they've seen that I have bipolar disorder, that I am a mental health care patient, and that it's been assumed that I am seeking drugs, for example. Or that I've been dismissed as just a mental health patient. And if I didn't have someone to advocate for me now, I'm lucky that I do have someone that advocates for me strongly, even when I'm not able to advocate for myself. But if I didn't have that, I might get discouraged and not want to go back. I could definitely see that being the case. And I could see for people that don't have someone to help them, to help advocate for them when they're down and out and they're not able to advocate for themselves, that just get discouraged and not want to go back and not want to seek medical treatment. And so things get bad and they don't seek treatment, they don't seek help, and that can be how health care gets away from you. And sometimes it's just that your mania makes you make poor choices, or your depression makes you sedentary, and you know, you start to develop healthcare issues. Sometimes that's the case. I'm not saying that it's always, you know, the fault of the healthcare issues, but I'm just kind of speculating as to the cause of this increased mortality for people like me who, you know, and that's the other thing. Not all people with bipolar disorder are like me. I'm very fortunate to be able to keep working. I'm very fortunate to be able to keep a family, to have people around me who support me, to have a steady income. I'm fortunate that I got my education before my bipolar really took me down too, so that, you know, the job that I have supports me very well. Not everyone with bipolar is as fortunate as that. And so there are a lot of people with bipolar, or there are a lot of people with mental illness in general, who are in a lower socioeconomic status than I am, to say it politely, who are struggling, and they don't have access to the gym, for example. They don't have access to, they can't do the keto diet, because I've mentioned it before, it's expensive. They, you know, they don't have access to all of these things, a therapist, for example. I mean, therapy is expensive. I've mentioned that before as well. So that's another thing with bipolar disorder, where I don't know if these studies controlled for socioeconomic status, but if they didn't, and they were looking at two populations that were kind of equal in other ways, I mean, I imagine they did, but if they didn't, then the population with bipolar disorder is likely to have lower socioeconomic status than a non-psychiatric population, all other things being equal. So there are a lot of considerations when you look at people with bipolar disorder and their mortality. I guess for me, it is sobering, and it makes me think for myself, gosh, I better do everything I can to take the best care of myself that I can, so that I get every year that I can out of my lifespan. So I'm in a depressive episode right now, and I'm finding myself just wanting to stay home and do nothing and live that sedentary lifestyle I was talking about. And I'm thinking to myself, no, girl, you've got to get out. You've got to push yourself to do it, because what happens if, right? What if this is that time for you? So if this video can be anything for anyone, whether you have bipolar disorder or not, let this be, I guess, a cautionary tale, or a tale of maybe motivation, perverse motivation, for you, that there are a lot of things against you, especially if you're living with a mental illness. There are a lot of things against you, right? So make sure you're doing everything you can to put things in your favor. That's the exercise, that's the sleep, that's good nutrition, that's socializing, right? That's doing something for your mind every day, like a puzzle or a hobby or something. That's therapy if you can. That's all of the things that you can do to put yourself on the best track you can, so that you can get the best outcomes that you can. Let's put it this way. Not so that you can get away from the worst outcome, but so that you can get the best outcome. How about we put it that way? All right. I hope this hasn't been too morbid. I'm sorry if it has. Thank you for sticking with me. I promise it won't be morbid next week, and I will see you in my next one. Take care, everyone. Bye.
StigmaCrusher.